Good morning. My name is Arjen Haverhals. I'm the CEO of Milestone Scientific. Pleasure of being here today in Florida, and I will give you more information about our company, historically, current status, and the future perspective of our business. I will skip over the safe harbor statement, and I will share with you the executive summary. I'm not knowing how well you know Milestone Scientific, but it is a typical research and development company for more than 20 years existence, in particular in the dental business, and recently we have entered also the medical market segment. We are rapidly expanding. We have high profit margins, growth margins on our products. We are financially very stable. We have more than $14.8 million cash at hand, no long-term debts, and we also have been able to grow the business year over year in the last 2 years, in particular last year. We posted a 90% revenue growth, a little bit north of 10.3 million. So all in all, it's a unique opportunity for the investment community to have a closer look at our company based on the current stock price to invest in our company. So who are we? Originally, we have started in the dental business under the name the STA Single Tooth Anesthesia System. And the products that we are providing is nothing more or less than what we call a patented technology called dynamic pressure sensing technology. What that technology is doing, it controls the flow of an injection by measuring in real time any pressure changes at the tip of the needle. Now, I don't know whom of you likes a dentist, likes to go to the dentist. If you can raise your hand and join me, but I'm quite sure that not everybody likes to go to the dentist out of fear for the dentist, for the procedure, or for the needle and for the syringe. 40 million people in the United States are dental phobic. With our technology, by controlling the flow, we are able to provide painless injection of a local anesthetic and making the injection also very precise and efficient. So we have been in this industry for about 2 decades. We sell primarily to distribution channel. We have an existence in more than 50 countries worldwide. We have about 20,000 units installed worldwide, and with this technology we have performed about 100 million injections over the year. It's publicly known clinical publications in peer-reviewed international trials of more than 100 publications. So the clinical concept is very solid and sound. Also, what I would like to share with you, the dental business as its standalone business is profitable based on the revenues that we have obtained and also of the high margins that we are welcoming. So from a business model, what we already mentioned in the beginning, from a business model, we use the razor blade business model. So it is a unit and then a single-use disposable to be used with each individual patient. So after being successful in the dental business, the company also decided to enter the medical business, and then in particular in epidural analgesia during labor and delivery. And not so much because of the addressable market size of this business being $5 billion, but moreover in the strong belief that we could solve the issues that are occurring during epidural analgesia, because as you might know, there are a lot of associated risk factors with these procedures, and our belief was very strongly that we could eliminate those risk factors. The market size is about 30 million procedures worldwide, 11 million procedures in the United States alone. Out of 4 million births in the US, 2.4 million women undergo an epidural analgesia during labor and delivery. But like I said, it's not risk-free. What we know from literature as well is that 5% of all these procedures are associated with severe migraine or headache, to that extent that it is disturbing the breastfeeding cycle from the mother and the newborn child. Paralysis, either transient or even permanent, and also mortality. And I will come back later to you what that morbidity rate means in terms of financial outcome and cost-saving potential for the hospital. What we are doing with our technology is measuring any pressure changes at the tip of the needle. And I will describe that to you also in detail how that works. What is important to know that we have been able to demonstrate in clinical trials that we can reduce the morbidity rates from 5% to 0%. This is, believe it or not, this is our current competitor. What you see here is nothing more or less than the hypodermic syringe out of 1860. Later on in the early 1900s, in 1920, it was positioned in the medical field as the loss of resistance technique. And what you see also here on this slide is our instrument where we go from manual, analog to digital. By measuring any pressure changes at the tip of the needle, you know exactly when you perform the procedure where you are in the tissue, whether you hit a membrane, whether you are really in the epidural space or where you actually go further. Now what you can imagine is that from a teaching point of view, it might be very difficult for the professor to teach the student with a manual syringe. What we know from literature as well, it takes about 2 years or 100 procedures for a resident to become profound and confident with the loss of resistance technique, which is a manual, very subjective technique. But we have been able to demonstrate here at the university in Miami, Florida, that we can reduce those 2 years to 2 days or 2 procedures instead of the 100 procedures. So it's a tremendous cost saving for teaching institutions in the development of residents. So let me explain to you what this technology is doing and how we can help today's practitioners and clinicians in increasing efficiency, safety, improving healthcare outcome at reduced cost. So what you see here is the patient is on the back. What you need to know is that in 17% of all these procedures that are performed, they are false positive. So in other words, if the clinician believes with that manual technology that he or she is in the epidural space, it's not, because the sensation might be that he is in the epidural space. Because normally what happens, it's a manual syringe. It's called the loss of resistance technique. So by advancing the needle, you see that on the back of the patient, by advancing the needle in the patient, you feel any pressure resistance against your thumb whilst you advance the needle or put pressure on the plunger in the needle, right? The loss of resistance technique, it's a 6-inch needle, a syringe filled with saline. You advance the needle, you feel any loss of resistance, and you think you are in the epidural space. 17% of the cases, it's false positive result. My own daughter, giving birth to her child, her first child, 5 attempts, she has scar tissue on the back. Ask friends in your network about epidural analgesia and you will be surprised. There's hardly anybody that will have a positive feeling about epidural analgesia. So the situation actually can even get worse. Because if you advance the needle, so you place the needle in the patient, you get any pressure feedback, but the situation actually can get worse because if you advance the needle too far, you hit a dura. And then if you hit the dura, that results in leakage of cerebrospinal fluid in the epidural space, and that causes all these side effects like severe migraine, headache, paralysis, and mortality. So what you see here, the epidural morbidity, dura puncture morbidity is about 5%. And then even more so, the cure, if that occurs, it is called a rescue. A blood patch needs to be done. That means that blood needs to be drawn from the patient to cover the membrane and to have a healing time. So that is an additional cost of 2 days for the mother and the child. In an independent study where we have compared in 4,483 patient data our technology with the loss of resistance technology, it was concluded in that study that was performed at the University Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. It was concluded in that study that cost reductions of $504 per patient procedure could be obtained when our technology was going to be used compared to the loss of resistance technique. Now, in this hospital, about 12,000 epidurals are performed on an annual basis. That means potential cost saving for this hospital of $6 million on an annual basis, which I believe is a pretty interesting value proposition for any hospital administration, CEO, or the executive suite of the hospitals. So, what is important to know from this small introduction, there are 3 immediate cost savings that we provide by using this technology. There's real instant pressure feedback to the clinician on this instrument. On the instrument you see here, you see the monitor here, you see the pressure buildup when you enter the patient's skin. You see really a pressure increase, which is the ligamentum flavum. Then you see a pressure drop, and that drop stays for 5 seconds, gives you then the confirmation that you really are in the epidural space. If you would go further, you would see an increase in pressure. So clinician tells us they love it because it tells them exactly when to stop. So the first cost reduction is what I mentioned to you, the $504 per average patient stay during labor and delivery. The second cost reduction is the shortage of the training cycle and the education cycle of residents, so i.e. that's the reason why we also target on teaching institutions. And thirdly, very important, is the cost of litigation. The cost of litigation in the United States for epidural procedures is everything from $500,000 per case to $3.5 million per case. And then I'm talking about those cases where there is not a loss of life, in terms of not the woman dies during the procedure or the baby dies during the procedure. And there have been cases in the last couple of years, in particular also in New York, if you look in the news, that these cases are happening. Those litigation costs and those settlements are much higher than the amounts that I'm talking about. So $504, training reduction cycle of residents, and the avoidance of the cost of litigation. Our portfolio doesn't stop there. Our ambition is really to become the standard of care in epidural analgesia. And I shared with you that there are 2.4 million procedures performed out of 4 million births on an annual basis. Let's assume from a mathematical point of view that becoming the standard of care is the equivalent of 2 million procedures per year with our technology. Combined with the high profit margins of in the high 60% of our consumables, again the razor blade phenomenon, that would result in a net profit of $80 million on the consumables for the company alone on an annual basis. And we strongly believe that that is a very compelling proposition for the investor and the investment community and institutions to invest in our company. That's the goal, that's the ambition that we are having. So where are we today? Today we welcome $10.3 million in revenue with a profit margins of in the low 60%, 63%. We do not have any long-term debts. We have $14.8 million cash at hand. So we have a runway for about 1.5–2 years to execute on the strategies that we have decided to execute on. Of course, you know, if you look at the pressure on the small cap and the micro cap market, we all know what's going on. We also feel the pressure. I would have been more pleased if our stock price would be higher than the 122 that we are currently trading off. But at the end of the day, I think that we are different from other companies that are in the small cap and in the micro cap market based on the financial situation we are having, based on the commercialization stage we are in, based on the solid clinical concept which is proven. We are not a small startup. We have proved that our technology is solid and sound. From a go-to-market approach in the dental business, I mentioned to you that we have presence in 50+ countries worldwide. From a revenue point of view, it's almost equally split between the domestic market being the US and the international market, and in particular Europe and the Asian market. In the medical business, we have our direct sales force. So I decided last year in the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter, to heavily invest in an aggressive sales force expansion. That resulted that we now have 12 full-time equivalents in our sales team. The entire organization is about 26 full-time equivalents. And that also resulted then in additional hospitals using and embracing our technology and system by the end of last year and also in the beginning of the year. I also mentioned that initially we went into the labor and delivery market segment, but also I'm very pleased that we have been able to enter the chronic pain segment as well. All in all, within labor and delivery and the chronic pain segment, we talk here about a market that we are addressing of north of $400 to $500 million. In other words, not only can the technology be used in labor and delivery, but as well as in chronic pain market segment, which is important for the company, that we are not dependent on only one segment. What we are also doing, as we are financially pretty solid, I would say, we are investing the money where we need to invest it into the right marketing and sales activities, national and internationally, but also, and I will come to that, also in other areas, because you could imagine that wherever the hypodermic syringe is used, our technology could apply, and I will come further to that. So what we also added in the portfolio is another product, which is called CompuWave and CathCheck, and you see that here. You see this display, which is a pulsatile waveform. It looks like a heart rate. And it is known that in the epidural space there's a heart rate. However, not many companies have been able to measure that heart rate and, more importantly, to establish the correlation of the heart rate and what the meaning is of that. So normally, after labor and delivery, 40% of the women remain in pain. Now I'm talking not immediately the hour after labor and delivery, but more in the hours thereafter, in 6 hours or a follow-up after there. 40% of the women remain in pain. So what does that mean? It's either there's not enough drug available or the catheter is out of place. Because normally what happens is that the catheter stays in the patient, the catheter is connected with a tube to a pump. The pump is then administering the drug to give pain relief to the patient. Patient is put on the gurney, back to her room, and with the risk then of having the catheter displaced or the catheter dislodged. What's normally standard of care? The clinician is coming or the doctor is coming, giving a bolus injection, waiting for 40 minutes and see whether there's pain relief for the patient. If you would imagine that you connect another set of disposable tubing to the catheter and to our instrument, and you would measure this pulsatile waveform within a minute, you know that your catheter is in place. So in other words, by providing our technology, you reduce the stress for the woman because she is not in a prolonged, unnecessarily pain. You reduce the stress for the nursing staff, and you reduce the stress from an economic point of view from the hospitals, because you know time is money, and the reduction of 1 hour or the saving of 1 hour is a significant amount of money from a cost saving point of view for the hospital. So this technology, the CompuWave and the CathCheck, we actually received a patent at the beginning of 2020, so there's an additional 20 years. The DPS, the dynamic pressure sensing technology, is patented. The CompuWave technology is patented. We also have a patent on the pressure sensors that we are providing and the adapters in our tubing, which is a kind of military engraved chip that avoids any knockoffs or copies on the consumables to be used on our instrument. So we are very well protected from a patent point of view. So what I already mentioned is that, you know, there's more. And more in terms of wherever the hypodermic syringe is used, our technology could apply. You can think about cosmetic medicine. in particular the injection of Botox for facial cosmetic applications. You can think about thoracic, and why is thoracic important? In lumbar, the morbidity rate is 5%. In thoracic, the morbidity rate is 17%. The higher you get up, the morbidity rate is in the 30% because the space is narrower than in the lumbar. So the technology becomes more and more important the higher you go up in the spine. The thoracic indication is approved in Europe, not yet in the US, but we apply for the 510K. Peripheral nerve block. We have done research in the south of France, and we have received a confirmation that our technology can actually differentiate between intra and extraneural placement of the needle, which is important. Peripheral nerve block is a market of 41 million procedures worldwide, and that's another area that we are looking into. Intra-articular, so injections in the joints, in the wrist, in your shoulder and elbow, and there are many other potential areas where we are looking into, and where we also potentially are looking into in liaising with partners in helping us. Like, for example, neurology, spasticity, all areas where our technology could apply. I already shared with you that our revenues this year, or the end of 2021, we saw a solid growth. Happy to see the results, happy to see the profit margins, and also I would say, in a nutshell, Milestone Scientific, it's not a research and development company that it used to be. We are in the midst of the commercialization. The company have enough financial means at hand to further execute on the strategy. Our concepts are clinical proven, both in medical, both in dental. We are making headways and inroads into the US market in both the hospital and the private pain market environment, as well as in Europe, where we have presence in Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Slovenia, and also in the Middle East, in particular Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. So the money that we have at hand, we continuously to expand and to focus on the execution. I think, you know, from your point of view, if in case you would like to have any more information, please contact me. I do believe that with the current stock development, that it's a unique opportunity to invest in the company now, and we keep our strong belief in being able to establish a new standard of care in epidural anesthesia. And like I always say, you know, the vision of the company that I've introduced for the company is really to bring drug delivery, or to take drug delivery out of the 1900s to the 21st century. And I think now it's about time to do that, and the future will tell us how successful we are. So thank you for your attendance and for being and sharing these last 25 minutes with me. And any questions you might have, I would be very pleased to answer those. Yes, sir.
What does the competition look like, and what's the patent situation?
Yes, so the question was, what does the competition look like, and what's the patent situation? What I already mentioned, and perhaps it was a little bit blunt that I stated that, but there is no competition other than the hypodermic syringe out of 1860. So if you look, for example, in pain, and the reason why we went into labor and delivery, there's no technology that could apply, because if you would use X-ray or CT or fluoroscopy, you cannot use that because it will harm the fetus, right? Now, in pain, for needle verification, they use X-ray contrast media. We have done clinical studies where we have been able to show that our technology would make fluoroscopy unnecessary to use in these procedures. The patent situation, 20 years protection, the dynamic pressure sensing technology is patented. The CompuWave, the pulsatile waveform measurements, is patented, another 20 years extension. And 2 years ago, or a year ago, we also received patent protection on the military engraved chip. and we have granted a patent in peripheral nerve block based on the research that we done. So in all those areas where we are in, from our, our DNA was research and development, of course, is making sure that there is sufficient patent protection. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
What kind of cost calculus system and the disposables?
Yes, sorry, a very good question. I didn't mention it in the presentation. So the question is, what's the cost on the capital equipment and the disposables? So the three possibilities. The list price is $14,995 on the instrument. We offer it in the market, selling retail price is $10,000. The hospital can buy it for $10,000. We can lease financing it, or we can consign it. If it is consigned, then we would like to have a premium price on the consumables, normal typical business offering at a minimum volume. We have two sets of disposables. One is epidural for the needle placement. The other is cath check for the catheter management. If you buy the equipment, then the prices are $65 and $50. 65 epidural, $50 for the cath check. If you lease, finance, or consign the instrument, then the price would be $85 and $65. So it's about a $20 premium.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.